All right, I want to take a look. 34 views to my video, St. John Chrysostom and the Papacy, Part 1. You know what this is telling me? It's telling me that the world is demanding the sequel. The world is for the sequel. And the sequel, the world shall now have. Um, let's go. This is Chrysostom's commentary on the book of Galatians. He didn't do sermons on Galatians. He just wrote a commentary concerning Galatians. And this is Galatians verse 1, or chapter 1, verse 18. Talks about, after 3 years, I went up to Jerusalem to visit Cephas. And look at Chrysostom's commentary here. What can be more lowly than such a soul? After such success, wanting nothing of Peter, not even his assent, but being of equal dignity with him, present I will say no more, he comes to him, Peter, as his elder and his superior. Well, hold on, Chrysostom. I thought Peter was Paul's elder and was Paul's superior. I didn't think Paul was coming to him as his elder and coming to him as if he was his superior. I mean, isn't that definitely what modern Roman Catholicism teaches? That's certainly what anybody who would believe that Peter was the supreme apostle would certainly say. That there's no as if with Paul coming to Peter humbly as if he's his elder. There's nothing humble about, a subordinate doing what his boss tells him to do. It's just what he's supposed to do. Well, here Paul raising Paul's humbleness, going to Peter as if he is Peter's, as if Peter is his elder, as if Peter is his superior. So that's point one. Does not sound very Roman Catholic there. Here's another something interesting. This is the very beginning of his commentary on Galatians, verse 1, chapter 1, verse 1 through 3. And here's Chrysostom talking about why Paul wrote Galatians. Since then, Paul saw the whole Galatian people in a state of excitement, of kindled their church, their edifice shaken, tottering towards its fall, filled with mixed feelings of anger and despondency. He writes an epistle to answer these charges. This is his aim from the very commencement. For the underminers of his reputation, i.e. the people who were talking trash on him in the Galatian church, had said there were others who were disciples of Christ, but this man of the apostles. In other words, the Galatians were saying, look, Paul was chosen by men, not by God, not by Jesus, the way Peter, James, John were. We don't have to listen to him the way we listen to them. He said, Paul, an apostle, not from men, neither through man. For these deceivers, as I was saying before, had said that this man was last of the apostles and taught by them. For Peter, James, and John were both first called and held a primacy. I'm going to get to how John Chrysostom viewed the primacy of Peter, James, and John in a minute. Held a primacy among the disciples, had also received their doctrines from Christ himself. So he's saying Paul is writing this in no small part to answer some of the Galatian chapter. And look what he says further down. Why does he not speak of his vocation rather than his apostolate, and say Paul not by man? Because here lay the whole question. For they had said that the office of a teacher had been committed to him by men, namely the apostles, whom therefore it behooved him to obey. It behooved him to obey the apostles. You see what Chrysostom's saying? He's saying, hey, Paul had his own authority. It came directly from Jesus Christ. And that's what he believed Paul was answering this is how he was answering the Galatians. Well, if, any Catholic today is going to tell you, Paul answered to Peter. Peter was the chief apostle. Paul obeyed Peter. Well, according to Chrysostom, he's saying Paul did not have to obey the apostles. He had his own authority, And the person he answered to was Almighty God. Okay, I want to hit upon the question of the the primacy that he mentions of Peter, James, and John. Here we go. This is homily 56 on Matthew. It starts at chapter 16, verse 28. Section 2. After 6 days, he taketh up with him Peter, James, and John. This is the configuration. Now, wherefore doth he take with him these only? Because these were superior to the rest. Peter, James, and John were, Chrysostom says, superior to the rest of the apostles. They held a primacy among the apostles. Now, here's the question. What kind of primacy was this? Was it because he had designated Peter to be his vicar after he had left the earth? No. Peter indeed showed his superiority by exceedingly loving him, but John by being exceedingly loved of him, and James again by his answer with which he answered his brother, saying, We are able to drink the cup, nor yet by his answer only, but by his works, both by the rest of them, and by fulfilling what he said. For so earnest was he, and so grievous to the Jews, that Herod himself supposed that he had bestowed herein a very great favor on the Jews, in slaying him. So, yes, Peter, James, and John held a primacy among the apostles, but it wasn't a jurisdictional primacy. It was a primacy of honor. So many Catholic apologists get carried away anytime they see a church father saying that Peter held a primacy among the apostles. If you really read these guys, you will see it's not a jurisdictional primacy. It's a primacy of honor. Let's see here. And there's one more point, or is there? Let me bring it up here. Okay, now this is interesting. This is his commentary on Galatians chapter 2, where he's commenting on chapter 2, verse 8. He that wrought for Peter the apostleship of circumcision, he wrought for me also unto the Gentiles. He calls the Gentiles the circumcision, the Jews circumcision, and he declares his own rank to be equal to that of the apostles. So he is of equal ranking to all of the apostles. And by comparing himself with their leader and with the others, he shows that the dignity of each was the same. So yes, the Chrysostom, according to me, there's no problem with Peter being the leader of the apostles. He had a primacy, but he was not the one that everybody obeyed the way today's Catholic bishops would obey the Pope. One more interesting thing I found about Chrysostom was going through the Gospel of his commentary or his sermons on the Gospel of Matthew. I got to his commentary on Matthew 16:18, which the First Vatican Council said that it was unanimous among the church fathers that they believed Peter to be the rock that Jesus would build his church upon. And what the Divine Chrysostom, and he is hardly alone in this, says, Thou art Simon, son of Jonas, thou shalt be called Cephas. Here we go. Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build a church. That is on the faith of his confession. So, what is the rock that Jesus is building the church upon? Is it Peter, or is it Peter's profession that Jesus is the Christ, Son of the living God? Well, according to Chrysostom, it's on the faith of his confession, not on Peter himself. And Chrysostom's in pretty good company as that kind of stuff, with numerous other patristics. I'll get into that some other time. Interestingly, I would happen to disagree with Chrysostom. I believe the rock was Peter. I believe that the church was built upon the rock that is Peter, and frankly, all of the apostles is, and Jesus is the chief cornerstone, according to Ephesians 4:30. So yeah, those are just some more examples of showing that John, during the time of John Chrysostom, you know, Peter was not seen as, the supreme apostle who ruled over the rest of them. The Bishop of Rome was not seen as having, a jurisdictional supremacy over the other churches. So that's part two, and part three will be coming up soon. See ya.